The last thing I expected to see while lying in an ICU bed was a text from my mother. I thought she was finally asking if I was alive. Instead, she sent me a photo of my sister's family pizza night with one sentence underneath. "Too bad you missed it." She had ignored every call from the hospital for 2 days, but somehow found time to take pictures of pepperoni pizza and smiling faces. I stared at the screen, then quietly smiled. Because 20 minutes earlier, I'd signed a stack of legal papers that no one in my family knew existed. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that being the dependable daughter was simply my role in the family. I was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who drove my parents to doctor's appointments, the one who helped with home repairs, the one who quietly transferred money whenever mom said things were a little tight this month. My younger sister, Ashley, was different. She was spontaneous, charming, and somehow always the center of attention. If Ashley needed help moving, everyone showed up. If I needed help, I usually figured it out myself. I told myself it didn't bother me. Families aren't always perfectly balanced. At least, that's what I kept believing. I worked as an architect for a commercial design firm in Chicago. The job was demanding, but I loved watching empty lots slowly become schools, libraries, and community centers. Long hours never scared me. Stress became normal. Coffee replaced sleep. Deadlines replaced weekends. Looking back, my body had been warning me for months. Frequent headaches, constant exhaustion, dizziness that disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. I ignored every sign. Until one Tuesday morning. I was presenting blueprints during a project meeting when the conference room suddenly tilted. At first, I thought I simply needed water. Then my vision blurred. Voices around me sounded farther away. Someone asked if I was okay. I tried answering. Instead, everything went black. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes beneath bright hospital lights. Machines beeped steadily beside me. A nurse noticed I was awake. "Welcome back." My throat felt dry. "What happened?" "You collapsed at work." She smiled reassuringly. "The doctors expect a full recovery, but they admitted you to the intensive care unit for close observation while they completed additional testing." ICU. The words sounded much heavier than I expected. I looked around the room. Everything suddenly felt very real. Were my parents notified? The nurse checked her tablet. Yes. And my emergency contact. "We've been trying." Something in her expression changed. "We left several messages." I nodded slowly. "They'll come." I truly believed that. No matter how complicated families become, hospitals are different. People show up. At least I thought they did. The first day passed quietly. Doctors explained my condition was serious enough to require monitoring, but very treatable. They wanted to understand exactly what had caused the sudden collapse before sending me home. I spent most of the day sleeping, occasionally waking to nurses checking monitors or adjusting medication. Every time I opened my eyes, I looked toward the door. No one came. By the second day, I finally asked the charge nurse again. "Has anyone called back?" She hesitated. "We've contacted every number listed. Several times. Maybe they're traveling." Maybe. I wanted to believe that. My phone battery had died during the ambulance ride, so one of the nurses kindly plugged it into a charger. Late that afternoon, she handed it back to me. "It finally has enough power." "Thank you." I unlocked the screen. 9 missed calls. None from my family. Most were from coworkers. 2 from an unknown hospital extension. Several text messages appeared. My manager. Friends. Neighbors asking if I needed anything. Then, one new message from Mom. For just a second, relief washed over me. Finally. Maybe she'd been driving. Maybe she'd only just heard. I opened the message immediately. Instead of concern, a photo filled the screen. A large pepperoni pizza sat on the dining table. My parents smiled from one side. Ashley and her husband smiled from the other. Everyone held slices toward the camera, like they were celebrating something. Underneath the picture, Mom had written, "Family pizza night. Hope you're feeling better soon." Ashley finally finished unpacking her new house. I stared at the screen for several long seconds.
No.
How are you?
No.
Which hospital are you in?
No.
We're on our way. Just.
Pizza.
I quietly locked my phone and placed it on the bedside table. The nurse looked at me with gentle concern. Everything okay?
I smiled politely.
Actually, yes. For the first time in years, everything suddenly made perfect sense. I wasn't disappointed anymore. I wasn't surprised. I was simply finished expecting people to become different during emergencies. I reached for my phone again, scrolled to another contact. Daniel Mercer, the estate attorney who had helped me prepare basic legal documents after buying my first home. He answered after the second ring. Claire? It's me. His voice immediately became concerned. Are you all right? I'm in the ICU. A brief silence followed. Then he asked quietly, What do you need? I looked toward the hospital window as snow drifted gently outside. I need to update every legal document we've ever signed. He didn't ask why. He simply replied, I'll be there within the hour. And by the time my mother finally remembered I was lying in intensive care, the paperwork was already waiting beside my hospital bed. Daniel Mercer arrived exactly 45 minutes later carrying a slim leather briefcase and wearing the same calm expression I remembered from years earlier. He shook my hand gently. It's good to see you awake. I wish it were under better circumstances. I smiled. So, do I. He pulled a chair beside my hospital bed and opened a neatly organized folder. I reviewed the documents you signed when you bought your house. Today we'll simply update them to reflect your current wishes. I nodded. This isn't about expecting the worst. I know, he replied. It's about making sure the people responsible for important decisions are the people you truly trust. That sentence settled heavily in the room. For years, I'd assumed my parents would always be the ones making medical decisions if something serious happened. But assumptions had a way of falling apart inside an intensive care unit. Daniel carefully explained every document. My healthcare power of attorney. My financial power of attorney. Emergency medical directives. Beneficiary designations. Property instructions. Everything was written in plain language. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just clear decisions made with a calm mind. Who would you like listed as your primary healthcare representative? Daniel asked. I didn't hesitate. My best friend, Megan. The emergency room nurse? Yes. Megan and I had met in college almost 15 years earlier. She had answered every hospital call, visited me twice already, and somehow knew more about my condition than my own parents. Daniel made the change. And your financial representative? My cousin David. He lives nearby and already helps manage my rental property. Daniel nodded again. One signature after another. The paperwork slowly reflected the reality of my life instead of the version I'd always imagined. By the time we finished, I felt strangely lighter. Not because I'd removed anyone from legal documents, because I'd finally stopped pretending reliability and biology were always the same thing. Daniel closed the folder. I'll file everything this afternoon. Before I could answer, someone knocked softly on the hospital room door. Then it opened. Mom walked in first. Dad followed behind her. Ashley came last, carrying a small gift bag decorated with flowers. For a brief second, nobody spoke. Mom forced a smile. Oh, sweetheart, there you are. I blinked. There I am. She hurried closer and kissed my forehead. We've been so worried. I looked at her quietly. Really? Of course. Ashley placed the gift bag on the bedside table. We came as soon as we could. I glanced toward the attorney sitting beside me, then back at them. As soon as you could? Dad cleared his throat. Ashley needed help moving into the new house. Mom quickly added, You know how stressful moving can be. I stared at her. I do. Ashley shifted uncomfortably. There were contractors. Furniture deliveries. The internet installation. Mom nodded eagerly. Everything happened at once. For several seconds, I simply looked at each of them. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my heart for 2 days. When the hospital called, what exactly was more important? Silence. Mom looked toward Dad. Dad looked at Ashley. Ashley stared at the floor. No one answered. Finally, Mom spoke quietly. We thought. She hesitated. We thought if it were truly serious, the hospital would have kept calling. I slowly picked up my phone from the bedside table. They did. I unlocked the screen, then handed it to her. 9 times. She stared at the call history. The color slowly drained from her face. I never noticed. I nodded. I know. No anger. No raised voice. Just facts. Daniel quietly stood. I apologize for interrupting. He gathered the documents into a neat stack. I simply need Mrs. Bennett to review one final page before I leave. Mom frowned. What documents? Daniel answered politely. Updated estate planning and medical authorization paperwork. Ashley's eyes widened. Estate planning? Mom looked alarmed. Claire, why would you need that? I smiled gently. Because emergencies don't schedule themselves. Dad looked toward Daniel. So, what exactly changed? Daniel remained professional. Mrs. Bennett has reassigned several legal responsibilities to individuals she believes are best positioned to respond quickly during future emergencies. Mom's voice became noticeably quieter. You mean, we're not listed anymore? Daniel chose his words carefully. The updated documents reflect Mrs. Bennett's current wishes. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Nobody mentioned the pizza. Nobody mentioned Ashley's move. Those excuses no longer sounded convincing. Daniel slid one final document across my hospital table. I just need one last signature. I signed my name carefully. Then, he turned the folder toward my mother. You may read the acknowledgement page if Mrs. Bennett has no objection. I nodded. Mom slowly lowered her eyes to the paper. She read the very first sentence. Then her hands began to tremble. Every excuse she'd prepared disappeared without another word. My mother kept staring at the document as though the words refused to make sense. Finally, she looked up. You removed us. Her voice wasn't angry. It was confused, almost frightened. I nodded gently. I did. Dad stepped closer to the bed. Claire, you really don't want us making decisions if something happens to you? I looked at both of them for a long moment before answering. This decision isn't about something that might happen someday. It's about what already happened. Neither of them spoke. I continued quietly. When the hospital called, I needed someone. When the nurses asked whether my family was coming, I honestly believed you'd walk through that door. I smiled sadly, but every hour that passed gave me the answer. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We never meant to hurt you. I believe that. Then why? I looked toward the window where snow continued falling outside. Because intentions don't answer emergency phone calls. Actions do. The room fell silent again. Daniel remained respectfully near the door, allowing us the privacy to talk. Ashley finally stepped forward. I should say something. Her voice trembled. I didn't know the hospital kept calling. I nodded. I know. I thought Mom and Dad had talked to you already. She wiped tears from her face. I was so excited about the new house that I never stopped to ask why they kept checking their phones. She looked directly at me. I've spent my whole life letting everyone focus on me. I never realized what that cost you. I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. This isn't your burden to carry alone. She lowered her head. No, but I still owe you an apology. Dad slowly pulled a chair closer to my bed. I failed you. Those 3 words surprised me more than anything else that day. When you were little, he continued quietly, you never asked for much. You handled problems yourself. You always seemed so capable. He gave a tired smile. I convinced myself capable meant you didn't need us. His voice cracked. I was wrong. Mom finally sat beside him. She still held the paperwork tightly. I looked at the hospital number several times. I thought. She stopped speaking. What did you think? I asked softly. I thought if I waited until after Ashley finished unpacking, I could visit you without interrupting everything. She covered her face. I didn't realize those choices would become memories I'd have to live with. Tears slipped through her fingers. The pizza picture? I almost didn't send it. I smiled sadly. I'm glad you did. She looked up in surprise. You are? It showed me something I'd been refusing to accept. What? That I had spent years hoping everyone else would finally treat me like a priority. I paused before continuing. But respect isn't built by waiting for people to change. It's built by creating healthy boundaries. Nobody argued. Nobody defended themselves. For the first time in years, everyone simply listened. Daniel quietly stepped forward. I've filed the updated documents electronically. He smiled politely. Please remember, these papers can always be revised in the future. Mom looked hopeful. They can. Daniel nodded. Estate planning isn't about punishment. It's about trust. As trust changes, documents can change too. After he left, the room became peaceful. No more excuses. No more blame. Just honest conversation. Before leaving that evening, Dad leaned over and hugged me carefully. I can't erase the last 2 days.
No.
But I'd like the chance to do better. I hugged him back. Doing better starts tomorrow. It doesn't start with promises. It starts with answering the phone. He smiled through watery eyes. I will. My recovery took another 3 weeks. The doctors eventually discovered that months of untreated exhaustion combined with an underlying medical condition had caused my collapse. With proper treatment, rest, and lifestyle changes, I made a full recovery. Life didn't magically become perfect afterward. Families rarely change overnight.
But something important had changed.
So had I. I stopped solving everyone else's emergencies before my own. I stopped apologizing for having needs. I stopped confusing love with unlimited access to my time, energy, and peace. About 6 months later, Mom called one evening. Not because she needed money. Not because Ashley needed help. She simply asked, "How was your day?" We talked for nearly an hour. It was one of the easiest conversations we'd had in years. Small changes. Consistent changes. Those mattered. Today, more than a year has passed since I left that ICU room. The legal documents are still exactly as I signed them. Not because I'm holding a grudge. Because they reflect reality. Trust isn't measured by family titles. It's measured by who shows up when life suddenly falls apart. Sometimes people ask whether I regret updating those papers while lying in intensive care. I always answer the same way. No. Because those documents weren't written out of anger. They were written out of clarity. The photo of that pizza didn't break my heart. By then, it was already breaking. What that picture really gave me was something unexpected. Permission to stop chasing the love I kept trying to earn. And the greatest lesson I carried out of the ICU wasn't about illness. It was about self-worth. Because the people who truly love you don't wait for a convenient moment to be there. They answer the call long before you have to wonder whether they'll come at all.